Thank you so much to our new board members. I'm so excited that you're joining us. And I think that this conversation today just kicks off an amazing journey for all of us to see what comes next, right? Recovery from the recovery. So I want to thank the programming committee for all of their help in working through today's topics. And I'm really excited. So here we go. I'm sure as many of you know, being in the publishing and media business, September was the month where all the statements of ownership were filed, if I'm not mistaken. So my question to everybody is, what do you think the long-term effects of the pandemic were or are on media publishing entities now that these statements were filed? It's been probably about 3 years. And what do you think they look like, and where do we go from here? Because it's the way I look at it is that statements of ownership are the great equalizer. They apply to everybody except for maybe a digital pub, right? But the changes in them because of the effects of the pandemic, I think were significant. And so I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. Open it up, have at it, guys. Anybody? Who actually filed a statement of ownership? Somebody here did. No? Oh, Greg, okay, tell us.
I think what I've seen with, I mean, you know, I haven't seen any sort of broad data, and you know, I don't usually see data like that, but you know, we do see the AAM data. That's the one I see most often when they collect it up after a statement period. But sort of anecdotally with my clients, I think what I saw, this actually probably applies. What I have in my head is some city and regional publishers. And what I have in my head is that they pulled back on certain areas of their circulation during the pandemic, notably things like waiting room distribution and hotel distribution for obvious reasons. And circulations came down. And now with the most recent CVC statements and statements of ownership and that sort of thing, we're seeing numbers come back up. So there is a recovery. We're distributing to waiting rooms again. We're distributing to hotels again. Publishers are concerned about their rate bases in terms of their advertisers, and they want to show some strength in those rate bases, and they want to show some growth. They want to show recovery from, you know, what had happened during the pandemic. So that's kind of what I've seen.
Cool. Thanks, Greg. Anybody else? Mike, anything?
I haven't filed a statement of ownership in probably 7 years. But, you know, I mean, I think the interesting thing is, though, is not necessarily surrounding statement of ownership, although it will impact that, is how many publishers have furthered or increased their journey into digital publishing. You know, whether that's because advertisers felt there was more, you know, easier of access, right? So if I'm a remote worker, I'm not getting my publication in the office anymore. So unless I've switched it to my home address, even if you have the rate base, you may not have the interaction and the engagement that you think you might have. So, you know, not strictly a statement of ownership issue, but I think a mix of how publishers are going to reach the audiences and then link those up with their advertisers. I think that'll change. I think it has changed.
Got it.
Yeah, Lisa, I'd add to that. Trying to get to that digital place, we're seeing the, you know, reduced frequencies. They're reducing the rate base. Looking at what the quality of the subscriptions that you have on file, getting rid of not just agency, right, but also low performing subs that don't necessarily have, you know, the recur possibility, moving more to that, you know, auto renewal, and really focusing on that digital piece. So getting the most that you possibly can out of the investment you have to make in the print side.
Right.
Right. And so making it as clean of a profit as you can while focusing on the digital. And that's across the board, all sizes of publishers that we have.
Right. Well, and that's what I thought. I sort of feel like everybody has to file them if you're going to mail anything, right? So what were the effects? I mean, a lot of you have multiple clients that are either, B2B or B2C or or pick your letters. But at the bottom line is, I still think it's, an equalizer across. This is something that everybody did. And, I think that there's long-term issues that, some people are feeling and some are not. Anybody else? Barb, Shrafel, maybe? Because I know somebody might have filed them over there.
Yeah, our team did about 50 this year. And I think what we were noticing the most is that in 2020, when publishers pulled back on their spending, which was to be expected, and the post office extended that extra 6 months, things just kind of aged out a little faster than I think what they expected, and how it affected what they were able to report on their statement of ownership. And I think publishers are going to have a hard time gaining that back unless they're willing to spend more money. And I don't know that some companies are ever going to be able to get back to where they were prior pandemic. So
But it still certainly makes sense for most of the publishers to spend the money that it takes to stay in compliance with the post office because of the level of savings that they're getting versus switching that to a standard rate postage from periodical rate. So every time we calculate that, we don't see a lot of publishers making a decision that, hey, let's forget about periodicals, let's let it slide under 50%, let's let our paid or request or whatever type of model the publications filed under slip. We're not seeing that. I was going to also mention, Lisa, that we still see a lot of interest from publishers that are not currently able to mail periodicals, that are mailing standard, in trying to get to that periodicals discount. And so we are still doing a lot of audits. We finished one a few months back. We have another one that's almost done now, and we have a third one that's looking to start in January. So there's a lot of interest certainly in that periodicals rate among publishers, as far as I can see. And for obvious reasons, the savings is really important. And so they are investing in getting to that over 50% level and qualifying and applying for periodicals. So I'm seeing that too is happening as we go along.
Anybody else? Tony, Cynthia, anybody seeing anything else they want to talk about?
It's from a from a revenue perspective, it's definitely less of a focus for a lot of our clients. I was speaking at a conference over the weekend, and one of them said, hey, pre-pandemic, they were 90% print, 10% digital. It's flipped on its head since then. And a lot of that was because they were primarily public distribution for all of that. And so they've said, hey, it's great that, and it's a group that primarily serves via like waiting rooms and doctors' offices, things like that. They were like, it's great it came back, but we don't want to be that dependent on a channel that we don't own moving forward. So even though their advertisers have since come back to them and said, hey, it would be great if we had more of that like print presence, they're basically holding it off, saying, no, like we're much better doing the on-site stuff, doing email and kind of making money from a digital route, not having the same corresponding costs associated with printing, postage, et cetera. And they like being able to own the full, a much larger percentage of the distribution channel as well.
Gotcha. Okay. Anybody else before I actually have an add-on to this. So one of the things that we've been talking about is there are some publishers that are just putting on bulk request or non-request names to build up their numbers, but if they're not request, and then if everything is still tied back to engagement, right? So content, and building your audience's interest, right? So if they're loading up on non-request in any way, either whether it doesn't matter if it's digital or print, what is that? What does that look like in terms of the engagement levels down the road, or even first 3 months? I mean, if they didn't request it and they're either getting it in print or digital, because of, they need a certain number to meet a rate base, but you're not getting that engagement. What does that mean? How does that play out? Can anybody speak to that? No?
Well, it's not a good situation, and it's sort of a desperation sort of move in a lot of ways, I would say, and it's not going to end well, and it's not a good long-term strategy. It's a short-term strategy if you don't have a lot of options, you don't have marketing dollars to spend with Lester to get you some requesters or whatever you're trying to do. And you have to, you feel that you still have, you owe a rate base to those advertisers that are with you. You can do it, but it certainly doesn't, it's not likely to create engagement, as you say, and it's not likely to end real well long term, because advertisers will start to feel that, and they won't be getting the response out of their advertising spend that they're looking for, and the more of the file that goes to those lower quality sources, the worse it's going to be. So short term, I think, sometimes you got to do what you got to do, but long term, I just don't see that as a sustainable strategy.
Neither do I, but I'm just trying to figure out, what does it look like moving forward? How do we recover? I mean, so there's an example of a publisher who did invest this past year and rebuilt his audience level back up. But then there's a discussion of not investing at all this coming year. So then, the seesaw is never going to go away, because if it's not a consistent level, right? And other publishers have done that as well. And so just curious to hear what other people are experiencing and sharing.
Do you have a telemarketing topic on the list, Lisa? Because
No.
I'd like to talk about that, because that's
Okay, it's not on the list of things, but if we can go there, sure.
Is it okay to go there now?
Sure. Take a spin. Let's go.
Because sort of pivoting off of this topic, right? Obviously that's one of the places that we would go for requesters in particular, is to the telephones. And what are people seeing? Obviously, Lisa, you have an insight into this, but I'm curious what people are finding. I have my experience in the last in 2022 anyway, has been a lot harder time getting people on the phone, getting decision makers on a phone, and consequently a lot higher cost per request on the phone than what we'd been seeing pre-pandemic. And so as publishers are starting to look to spend some marketing dollars and get those files repaired or keep them going where they need to be, that source has been challenging for me this year. And I'm just curious if that's sort of across the board, or there are some bright spots with that. I sort of attribute it to this sort of the pandemic, and then just people not working from an office 5 days a week, not working in the same way that they had before the pandemic, and it making it harder to track people down with a phone call than it used to be through an operator or directly, and all those types of things.
Well, from experience with what I do in my other job,
Yeah, right.
I
Exactly.
would say that no. I mean, there are certain industries that were hit and that had a very difficult time, but they're very select. Okay. And that overall, unless it was, one of the severely hit industries, that no, if anything, I think it goes back to the publication, the audience, the engagement, the appropriateness of content, because what we're finding is that even the older subscribers that would be quote unquote too old and aged out, they're still there. Okay. They might not have been reachable for one reason or another, but they're still there and they want their publications. In terms of costs, I gotta be honest, no, I wouldn't say, yeah, maybe in some markets that there could be a slight bump, but overall where our clients have had flat budgets, the prices that had to be held, I would say in 95% of them, we've been able to match those prices. So, I think it has to do with industry. I think it has to do with vendor. So our particular industry has seen some turnover in terms of vendors going out of business, and maybe others having to change their strategies of how they work. I think in my situation, the consistency of what we've been doing for 30 plus years, I think may help us ride those bumps a little bit better. And I can't speak to what newer vendors that have come into the market. I can tell you that I've received, things from from clients that said it didn't work there. Can you try it? And I'm like, yeah, and it does work. So I think there's a lot of factors, and I don't know, other than the super very specific industries that got hammered, but we all know them. And I think that that's a different situation. I think they're very industry specific in that case. Does that help?
Is there a migration, do you feel like, to people using cell phones as a primary business line? And is that impacting the ability for telemarketers to reach those people effectively because of different rules, I guess, that apply for you calling cell phones?
Correct. There are laws, and Leicester has chosen to abide by the ones that apply to the United States. And so I would say the number of cell phones on the files are increasing, but we're not seeing a decrease in main numbers, meaning business numbers, right? So we have the ability to do both. And I think that's given us the flexibility, and it's given our clients flexibility. In some cases, they want us to, because if they're giving you your cell phone, they're probably more of an engaged subscriber than not, right? So that helps. Okay, it helps with, they want the magazine and they're willing to give you that information. But in some cases, it's not true. It's very industry segmented, and the response rates show that. And so those laws are real, and based on the legal advice that we're given, we've made decisions as a company that that those laws have to be adhered to. Other companies have made the decision not to, and they do what they want. So it's on a case-by-case basis, I think. Did I answer your question well?
Yeah. I just, is there anybody else that has any recent calling experience that they want to add into the mix?
No, it's Rich. Hi, everyone. Thanks for the invite. I question for the group on request. Right, what do you think the primary driver is now? Is the primary driver to show that it is, it's requested and wanted by the recipient, or has the periodicals rate become the more important driver, or is it even? I'm trying to get a sense.
From my stuff, Rich, I would say it's the periodicals.
Mm-hmm.
But it's very, I'm sure it's it's very publisher by publisher, but that's sort of where ones that I've had more recent experience definitely have been more focused on that. But if they're auditing with you, I mean, I think they have a different perspective, right? Because they're trying to show as good an audience as they can through that audit.
Yeah, I think that we're getting pressure on all sides. Some still want that, others want it consolidated. Some want the source lines consolidated, others want the period extended, right? And there's other bureaus that will let you go longer than that. And we've seen some attrition to that standard. So, and the other thing I'm seeing that I'm just trying to get my head around, like there's so many, points to integrate now. So, and level of engagement. I know we have a level of engagement on our reports, but I still think there's a bit of a disconnect. I think publishers are really still having a difficult time, kind of getting their arms around all those different levels of engagement, to determine who wants things, even though, and people will say that their software does it and their solutions do that. But I know some very large publishers that are actually exporting data from data houses, their own data houses to run their own analytics on it, because some of the analytics are limited. But I think I'm trying to get my head around what the future of the BPA. Sorry, I'm just approaching this from my point of view at the moment. What the what that paragraph means, right? And who's using it, right? Because it really drives a lot of expense. There's an opportunity to showcase the the engagement of the individual the last time they were spoken to, but then you also go on the other side of the equation where certainly as they move to digital, like some of us, I think a lot of us have been in our jobs a long time, and we may be opening emails each and every time, but maybe not renewing our information 2, 3, 4 years. That doesn't make me any less a valid user, or that I don't want it as much, right? So I'm trying to see if there's a way to ingest all these data points, right, to make it cost effective for the publishers. So thank you for the answer on the periodicals and the request.
Yeah, I mean, I think first off, Rich, really great to see you again. A long time.
Yeah, too long. See you, Michael.
Exactly. I think about that paragraph, not often, but
Right.
every so often. And to me, it was right for back then, right? Like when we didn't really have, other than say a readership study or a publisher doing a readership study or a pass along or whatever, we didn't really have back then the way to gauge engagement with a product. Right now, and that was one way of doing it. You could say, okay, that's recency, quote unquote, right? Somebody is requalified within the last year or two or whatever, and they're of a certain source, personal direct request. But now I think there's better ways to show engagement.
Yeah,
even
or certainly more,
publisher.
or certainly more and different, right?
Right. I mean,
Right.
listen, I've never been on the advertising side, but I deal with a lot of agencies now, and I don't know why, again, all due respect, I don't know why anybody would look at that as like a sort of a way to say, look about engagement or anything other than what it simply says, which is these people have been requalified in a certain period of time. But to your point, you could have a 3-year-old name that falls off that's very engaged with, say, a newsletter, an electronic newsletter. Or you could have a 1-year person who just likes to requal but never actually engages with the product, right? So
Yeah.
there's probably some room in there to figure out what's the best way to show that.
Yeah, that needs to
engagement on a
think.
day-to-day
That needs to
basis.
think. Thank you for that, Mike.
Sure.
Good points.
So that leads to another part of this conversation that we're going to go to 1 second. I just want to answer Dennis's question. Dennis, it has to do with where the list comes from. I think the age of the list, it depends on where it's from. If it's from subscribers that actually actively, renewed over the phone, whether it is paid or controlled, it doesn't matter. The phone numbers are usually much, much better. It's when they're a third-party list that there, in my humble opinion, there are more problems with the phone numbers. Does that make sense? But if it was a prior, subscriber. Okay.
It does make sense. I also just threw that in there because we were doing a last ditch calling effort for an event in Los Angeles a couple of weeks back, and the client had not updated their database in like pre-COVID, and just pre-COVID picking up those phone numbers was just an absolute fail and waste of time and effort, at least like 50% of it, right? They had a huge significant turn in their industry. And so, just paying attention to that stuff.
That's going to do it.
And I'm gonna add a comment. One of the magazines that we work with is in the meetings industry, and you know, that had a huge downtick. That was affected greatly by the pandemic. So we've made strides to use companies that can validate and append addresses. And we do that with emails now for clients. And I think it goes to Dennis's comment about the quality of your list. If you're doing enough things to try and augment what you have, it will make it easier to requalify some of those older names if you put them through some type of validation to see if the address is still active or the phone is still active.
Thanks, Barb.
Yeah.
All right. Anybody else on this one, or we want to jump to the next one, which actually feeds off of the engagement idea, if that's okay? All right. So and I've had several conversations with some people about this, and it goes to what drives engagement, right? And what's going to involve someone in content, in digesting what is sent to them. And I think that this is a long-term issue that's been going on for years, and it varies by publisher, by industry, and by basically staff. So who still struggles with matching the audience of any publication, okay, with the editorial, okay, and the sales of the publication to align, right? So if you're writing, if your editorial team believes that they're writing this for these people, right, and your publisher is selling it to X, Y, and Z people, but the true engaged audience is different than those definitions, right? How do you bring it all together? And it's not an easy problem to solve. Who's faced that, and anybody successfully aligned it, or it? And I was talking to somebody earlier today about this. This is not an easy problem to solve, but I'm curious to know if anybody has successfully done it. Okay, maybe not.
So Lisa, can you say that again? I'm sorry, and slowly.
So it's about it. So if the pieces aren't aligned, so if the content, the editorial team believes that they're writing for this person, okay, and the publisher is selling to a different person or a varied world, and that's what they're selling on, and your audience is neither, right? So everything is out of alignment, but then you're still being pressed, if you're an audience or if you're in sales, that your engagement numbers aren't there. How do you bring it back into alignment? Has anybody faced this challenge? Because in some markets, it feels like that's happening more and more, that the disparate energies are not allowing the content to be digested by who should be reading it. Does anybody having that experience? Is anybody a consultant?
I've had that over the years, certainly that experience, I would say, Lisa. And you know, I think it's sort of an impossible task. I think what you have to come to realize is that if you create a product, the product is going to have a certain audience. You know, you're writing it and it's going to appeal to a certain audience. And if you want to have a different audience than who you're writing to, you're going to have a real problem. So really what you have to do is you have to say, if I don't like the audience that I'm reaching with the content I'm writing, I have to change the content that I'm writing to appeal to the audience that I want.
And then that is usually a problem, for what I've understand from the conversations that I've had. So it seems to be like the age-old problem of, you know, who the content's being written for versus who the audience team is tasked to build versus who they're selling as the subscribers and the content. Like there's a misalignment. And so that was it's come up in a couple of conversations with some consultants in the industry. So I wanted to see if anybody else out there had encountered any of this.
Yeah, I think
we actually.
Yeah.
Sorry, Rich.
No, you go ahead.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. So we run into it on the commercial side in a lot of cases. So I spend a lot of my time kind of talking to the sales and revenue folks on the client end. And it kind of depends on who's driving your business. I think the nice part, especially on the digital side, is a lot of this data is readily available in terms of, okay, who's reading what are they exposed to with a lot of this. I think the challenge for the audience development folks is it can be a moving target, right? Where there is a little bit of, there's a lot of recency bias in terms of, so, Ford comes walking in saying, oh, we don't care about fleet managers anymore. We care about maintenance managers anymore. The first thing the publisher does is turn around and say, forget the fleet folks, we need the maintenance folks, et cetera. And as we all know, that doesn't happen overnight. It takes some time to build some of this stuff up, fill in these demos. So I think the nice part, once you're able to start showing who those people actually are in terms of, here's this piece of content, you kind of have to you're able to take some of the guesswork out of the editorial side, because they are typically, maybe not comped, but at least measured from a KPI perspective on page views, visits, et cetera. So they are just trying to make sure they're hitting their goals. Once you corporately start aligning not just page views, but are they the right page views with the right advertising dollars? Now you get everybody rowing in the same direction, for lack of a better term. I think it's not necessarily a misalignment in terms of, oh, we don't know, the left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing. It's, we're comping people for very different things, and everyone can be successful based on their legacy KPIs without actually doing something that moves the whole business forward.
Got it. Okay, but that's, so you really do have lived what we're, this misalignment of the editorial audience and sales. It's really a thing, and thank you.
And they all want to talk to each other too. It's not like anyone's intentionally building these silos. So I think, in a lot of cases, it's just a matter of forcing these folks to get in the room together.
Oh, sorry, Rich, you go ahead.
No, I think we're all saying the same thing. I think now, and Michael, it comes from one of your earlier points, there's different and faster ways to measure now. Because everything, from print goes to digital, or digital to print now, right? Depending on what you do first. But there's generally a digital element to it, and pretty quick if you have engaged users, or if you're in alignment, or if you're misaligned. So if you're not getting people visiting the page, spending time on it, there's deep analytics on those pages now that can really drive what you do next, as long as you're paying attention to the signals, right, and not the noise, right? So I think Tony and Mike said it quite well.
Yeah, it's interesting. Tony, you mentioned about not getting comped on it. A couple of companies ago, we didn't have a good connection. And when I say we, audience, didn't have a good connection with editorial, right? So editorial was writing a lot of good stuff. This was in the pharma industry in particular. A lot of good stuff, a lot of really smart, authoritative type of content. But we've started to run reports to show what was resonating, what wasn't resonating. And ultimately, after a couple of years, it actually became part of the compensation plan for these particular editors. We didn't want to do clickbait or anything like that, but there was an element of, if you're writing content, it has to resonate with the audience, right? Because then it's going to resonate with the advertisers, or the audience will resonate with the advertisers. At Reuters, we take it to another step where we actually have people in our editorial organization that have audience in their titles. So we have audience editors. And again, we're a news organization, so man bites dog, you can't really spin that many ways, right? I guess you could be more descriptive about what kind of dog or what kind of man bit the dog, but it's having that ability and having those types of analytically focused and marketing focused and audience focused people in the editorial side of the business. I think all of us have been in companies where there's this huge brick wall between church and state, right? Between marketing, audience, and editorial. But I think more and more now, the editorial side of the business is coming to audience to say, what should we be, doing? What should we be thinking about? I mean, we've got SEO people in our editorial org as well now too, because there's an important component of SEO and editorial. So I think it's not just fighting the battle, but it's really getting, people on your side and getting folks that, see audience development slightly differently, right? From an editorial standpoint, as opposed to a marketing standpoint. But the marriage really is that the understanding of the analytics and the understanding of what drives the audience for, forward. And at the end of the day, you should almost forget about the advertising component and just look at, we're writing a bunch of stuff. We're spending a lot of time, effort, and money doing it. And is it being well received by the community? Because then everything else will follow from that.
So I'm going to change this up a little bit and open it up to everybody. I want everybody to tell me if they've heard of this. Okay, this is something brand new. And I want to know if you're going to try it, if you guys are interested in it. Audio content for each of your publications. I don't care if it's a newspaper. I don't care if it's a paid magazine or it's a controlled magazine. Are any of your publishers exploring the idea of audio content? And it's not a podcast. It's your magazine, whatever it is, newspaper, magazine, newsletter, whatever. Is anybody recording the content and using a recorded version as an option in any of the newsletters or the digital editions or the website? Somebody,
I mean,
anybody?
I've definitely heard, discussion about that topic and vendors out there having the ability to create audio versions of print articles that people could listen to, like a podcast. And it seems like an interesting idea, and certainly audio content has just been, so successful with podcasts and books in particular. I mean, people just seem to love listening to that content, that it seems to make sense. But I don't have any publishers that I've been in touch with or work for that have started offering that or testing it.
Okay.
So, but it certainly sounds like something that would be a good potential that could work for publishers. So I guess my answer is I don't have any insight into it, but it sounds good.
I did some research into it earlier in the year, very beginning of this year. Amazon Web Services offers it as an add-on to your website. And for the first year, there's no charge to do it. It's all AI generated. And so I feel like when I have proposed the idea of testing it to some of my clients, they that's the biggest pushback, is that the AI voices have not caught up. I mean, they're hard to listen to sometimes, but a lot of consumer publishers are doing it. And I feel like it's an opportunity for publishers to get ahead of the curve and let the technology catch up. But I haven't convinced anyone to do it yet. But I mean, I think it's a fascinating way for people to offer a new way for you to consume all this content that we're creating. And I want someone to try it.
Yeah.
But the big guys are doing it. New York Times does it. Washington Post does it, I think. The Atlantic does it, I think. So the big consumer books are doing it. And I feel like there has to be some value in it if they continue to do it. For me, and I'll stop talking to you, but for me, I feel like something like the Amazon Web Services that I investigated, it was, you decided whether or not you wanted that piece of content to be for an audio version to be produced. So it added no extra work to anybody's table, which I think is which was really important, right? Because you got to get buy-in, and adding a new thing for somebody to do, nobody wants that. But I think it's relatively easy to incorporate, and who will do it might have an edge. I think that's my opinion.
Anybody else on that one? We're going to go to a data question next.
I mean, just really quick, first off, just because the big guys are doing it doesn't necessarily mean it's the right thing to do. Lots of mistakes are made across the board, believe me. I think it's interesting, but I just think it's just another channel. It's just another way to get the content out there. And you have to balance out with even brand identity. Like, do you want a robotic voice spitting out your news? Some organizations might, some other organizations might not. So there's a lot to be said about the AI capabilities of that. It's something we're looking into. We would much rather actually, through our content creation studio, create a podcast or some other audio content for our advertising clients, as opposed to really just doing closed captioning for our content. We're pretty convinced that most people who look at our site can read our content fairly easily and don't necessarily need to have it read out to them. But we do, you know, we have Reuters Live. We do a lot of live content. We do a lot of quote unquote audio video type content that you could listen to in your car or on your device or what have you. So it's just another platform. It's just another tool, and it's sometimes more work. So you have to balance all three of those things.
Thank you.
I have, Elisa, seen an offering from the guys at eMagazines that they developed a tool for that. So they can create audio versions of your magazine articles as in addition to creating those digital apps and stuff that they do. So it is out there, and I know they work with those large consumer brands like the Candid and the Hearst and the Meredith brands. So those are clients at eMagazine. So they may be doing that, some of what people are seeing out there. But that is definitely probably an easy way to test it is through eMagazines. They've built that technology.
Got it. Glad to hear it. So I think it's something that's either maybe it's appropriate for some markets and it's not appropriate for others, but who knows? You know, maybe Cosmo will put or Vogue will put one of their editorials or one of their columns up.
Yeah.
You know,
I've never listened to it. I'm looking at the Wall Street Journal now, and it's on every article. You can listen to it. I wonder if they insert ads into it, right? I mean, like a podcast. I've never listened to. I mean, I've listened to plenty of podcasts, but I've never listened to listen to this article. So I'm wonder if they inject ads into it. I don't know.
You'll have to check that out, Rich.
Yeah,
I will.
It really depends. It depends how closely or how far away you want to separate edit with advertising. But if you're like looking at an article, for example, and it's got a video playing in there with a pre-roll of from an advertiser, it's kind of the same thing. But I think you'll get significant pushback from editorial on that, unless it's something like a custom piece or something that was created for an advertiser.
all right, we're going to jump into a data question now, and I'm going to beg my programming committee members to help me out. We were having this conversation about getting digital engagement from some groups that are involved or consuming the content, and it's filling in the gaps because of the different silos that they are in. And it seemed to be a significant issue, as is growing first party data and including the benchmarks. So I am asking, I want to know what you guys are doing. Elizabeth, jump in. Bob, jump in. Please help me out here. But this is one of the conversations that we've been having. Elizabeth, can you help?
Yeah, we were talking, way back when we always were worried about audience silos and different people in different places, but now we're kind of worried about, I was in a meeting last week where we were talking about more of the digital silos. So you've got Google Analytics stuff over here, you've got your CDP over here. I was trying to pull in digital edition statistics into a Google Studio, thing that was like once a month, and it was just kind of painful. And then you got the CRM for your advertising group. So it was just like, we're trying to figure out how to stitch all this together. We were talking to Dennis about that last week, actually.
Yeah. I mean, it's like, this is such a tricky problem and so important to resolve. It ties back to engagement. And one of the questions that we're always trying to solve for is like, how strong, like, can you actually measure like real customer and like your the real value of the relationship you have with your customer, and how do you define that and what constitutes that? And can you look at engagement differently, like in all channels, and tie it back together meaningfully? Right, so you can sort the wheat from the chaff, and then really be able to articulate like what real engagement is back to a customer. So like, this is what we're doing a lot at 7 Ounce Digital, is like really trying to define engagement, like actively versus passively, and defining at-risk customers, and then benchmarking what percent of your audience needs to be actively engaged, passively engaged, actionable. What percent of your audience do you need to know on site? What percent of your audience should be emailable? Because when you, like, what we always hear a lot about too is like, then how do you take your audience package back to your advertiser and say, like, here's the channels where I can reach people. And if you pick a channel, that's great, but I also want to show you like where you're leaving audience on the table and how can I quantify that for customers. So that's kind of what we're trying to solve for, and what I kind of love to think about as well.
And it's more complicated by the fact that the whole Apple open rate is not as measurable anymore. So we were
Right.
trying to get rid of some unengaged people from some of our newsletters. And I was like, well, it gets, you can't just rely on click rates. I mean, I know that's the ultimate, but you've just taken away a whole layer of, some piece of engagement that makes it a little more complicated to analyze.
Yeah. Way more complicated. And there's bot traffic, right? I mean, I was looking at somebody the other day that was like, oh, this person has 4,000 page views. And I'm calling bullshit on this right now. Like, over what period of time? And, because we used to, like, when I was at back at Farm Journal, we had a commodities update, right? And so your web page auto refreshes like every minute with a new market. And like, so if you left your page open on your browser for an hour, that was 60 page views. And it, great for counting. But understanding that level of detail is really important.
Anybody else?
I was just gonna say, we are seeing with one of my clients, this is happening a lot more, where every once in a while there's just some really like wacko paid click-through rates, right? And those are from some kind of spam. We've been investigating some kind of spam of clients. After you've opened it, it's clicking on everything multiple times. So it's tough to find a metric that can really like help you forecast, right? For example, one of my clients, we're having a very hard time getting webinar registrations. And so we decided that what we have to do is get X number of people to the registration page itself, right? Like to that page. And then you can forecast maybe conversions if you're tracking that number, but that anything before that in the emails that you send or the emails that are opening are not valid. They're not going to help you kind of create a forecasting measurement around it. It's tough.
Yeah. I mean, they're really, and I'm in marketing, so I get to exaggerate, do it all the time. There really isn't a good metric to judge engagement on a newsletter. There really isn't. And I know exactly, what you were talking about these appliances. Proof Point's a big one that causes, I guarantee you the click-through rates you have are probably anywhere between 50% to a third less than they actually are by like humans, like real people. And you can see that. I mean, we use Sailthrough as our vendor. So I can go in if I've got nothing better to do, which is usually never, and then I can see like, Dennis, heck, he must really love our content. He clicked on the same link 50 times. I mean, it's like, now, okay, sometimes maybe somebody put that in in a corporate environment and it got reshared, so it looks weird like that, but that doesn't happen very often. So, one of the things that we struggle with is how do we do that? And, recently we've been running surveys and we've been asking our customers, what is it that you like about this newsletter? What do you want us to cover? What don't, what isn't helpful, what is helpful, that kind of thing. And you kind of start to get an idea of the level that people are paying attention to your newsletter. by having that kind of device where if it's a robot or an appliance clicking on a link, it's not going to give you survey answers. So there's other ways. There's quizzes. There's other little things that you do that you can do on newsletters, or just have a simple way that they can feed back information at any given time. We've started to do that in a lot of our newsletters. A lot of the feedback you get is kind of junk, obviously, as you can imagine. But some of it is really valuable. And again, it gives you sort of this inferred idea of what kind of impact your newsletters are making beyond open rates and click-through rates.
My quick question for you, are you talking about click-through rates on ads or click-through rates on content?
It's actually both.
Okay.
It's actually both.
Because what would be the driver? Like I get the driver on ad fraud, right? You know, you click, you know, you want, you know, if, you know, I don't think too many people, you know, transact on clicks anymore. I mean, it's mostly impressions, but you know, what would be the drive if you don't have like a program, like if it's all direct sold, right? Where you know, you have, you know, direct, you know, interaction with the buyer, right? That you've vetted. Like what would be the driver that there would be, you know, bots on a page or invalid traffic, you know, clicking on stuff? Like what would cause that?
So there's a product, there's many, Barracuda, Proofpoint are the two biggest ones, that will actually take an email before it even hits your desk on your inbox, and it will actually click on every link. And what it's doing there is it's trying to ascertain, is that link going to a real page? Is it getting a 401 or 404 error or some other so it's got some sort of intelligence behind it. So an ad is a click, is a link. So you can see that, and we've seen that on some of our event side stuff, and it's difficult to combat it.
Yeah, but that would be minimal. Like I wouldn't say. I mean, they're trying to do QC.
Depends.
Like,
it depends what your audience is. If it's a highly corporate audience, you know, like when I was in the pharma industry, every single pharmaceutical company, the big ones, had these kinds of appliances or these kinds of walls set up. We don't have to worry about it so much on Reuters because a lot of our stuff is consumer emails, you know, Gmails and you know, your Optimum Onlines and all that sort of stuff. And those are less likely to have these kinds of traffic. But I would imagine the customers at BPA and a lot of the folks on this phone probably very much more affected by this than folks that are going to consumer audiences with consumer emails.
So we remove 2 out of every 3 clicks. So as an email provider, we send 7 billion emails per year, or our clients send it through our platform. I just threw like a little article in the chat just so that everybody can go through. 2 out of every 3 are bad. And we had the head of deliverability at Proofpoint actually spoke at our client conference this year, and he got up there and said, like, listen, we're not doing this to like cause problems, right? We are doing it to make sure that like when those bad actors get out there and send emails, it doesn't crash BPA servers, right? Because as we know from a security point of view, like everyone's going to click on stuff they can't help themselves. That's why SMS phishing is doing so well with all this kind of stuff. So they aren't doing it to cause any issues. But if you aren't kind of going all the way through on some of this stuff, it's going to cause some confusion internally. And let's be honest, click traffic or bot traffic on your websites has been doing this for years. So once you start to back some of this stuff out, and we remove, so 2 out of every 3, it's still there in the back end on these reports, but by default, we water it down with some of this to give you a more legitimate number. So again, it goes into a lot more detail on the content that I just put out there, but I know we're about out of time, so happy to follow up with anybody individually.
Thanks, Tony. Yeah, like I said, I'm just trying to get the sense that usually there's a driver, there's a business driver behind it, right? I mean, might be to Mike's point that it's Barracuda trying to keep the email safe before it comes through, right? I just yeah, okay, this is helpful. Thank you.
Thank you all. I'm so grateful that you were all here. I'm grateful for the amazing conversation and topics and questions. And again, I think this is what MACMA is about, is for this industry, for us all to come together and just talk. Because I think that we all learn from each other. And thank you for everybody who shared. And Tony, thank you for sharing the article. Thank you for sharing your opinions. Really grateful. I'm going to thank the new board members for joining us today. December 1st, New York City, Hearst Tower. Please join us. The morning session that FIPP is putting on is shaping up to be quite an amazing session. So we probably all want to try and be there early. So join us then. The afternoon will kick off right around noon, maybe a little bit after, upstairs. You must register. You have to show proof of vaccination. And a big shout out to all of our sponsors and all of you and the board. Thank you all for being here. Well, I'm available if anybody wants to reach out, chat. Not, we'll see you December 1st, I hope.
Thanks.
Thanks, guys. Thank you so much. Have a
Thank you.
great
See ya.
evening.